Welcome to the Squared Circle Pit with your host, Rob Pasbani.
You are now entering the Squared Circle Pit. Welcome. It's Rob Pasbani. And I'm solo today because there's so much to catch up on. I think it's just me and you. I need to vent. I need to get through the insane weekend that AEW had this past weekend, both highs and lows. And I want to start, of course, with the CM Punk story. First of all, congratulations to AEW. Before I get to the CM Punk thing, AEW had their largest show in their 5-year history, and it's allegedly, and you know, the stats look pretty solid, the largest paid attendance for a pro wrestling show in history at like 81,035, something like that. And of course, the previous record was WrestleMania in Dallas. And I think that one came in somewhere at like 79 a night in sold in paid tickets. Now that's the asterisk here. It's paid tickets because, of course, if you count comps, if you count all the people working, the stats might be different. But as far as people paying to get in the door, AEW can claim that record now, which is great. And the show itself was so wild to see as a longtime pro wrestling fan, just seeing a stadium show that is a non-WWE show. The only time in recent time I could really think of that would be like a New Japan Tokyo Dome show. But even those didn't seem as big as this show. It had such a cool vibe to it right from the start. And it made watching the show extra special and extra fun. And then what happens? But as you're watching the show, right into the first match, we hear about some controversy. The first match of the main show. So there appear to be, or there's confirmed to be, a scuffle between CM Punk and Jack Perry. Jack Perry wrestled on the pre-show, and he wrestled Hook for the FTW title. And at one point in the match, Perry came out in a limo, and they started the match fighting around the limo, on top of the limo. They did suplexes on the roof of the limo. Very gross. I was like, come on, guys, don't do that. And then at one point, Perry knocks on the windshield with his fist to be like, you know what this is here? Real glass. Go cry me a river. And this seemed to be a direct shot at one CM Punk, who is not one to let something like this go. And CM Punk, and to explain the context here, let's backtrack. If you're not as addicted to the backstage drama as I am, what happened is a story surfaced about a month ago, because obviously with CM Punk, there's this consistent back and forth about if he's good for the locker room or not. I don't know. I'm a fan. As a fan, I love CM Punk. He has great matches. Collision has been really fun to watch. I've been very happy to see CM Punk back. But I hear and he's basically the locker room leader of Collision. And Perry, about a month or two ago, was asked to get a few weeks off for vacation. And his idea was to do an injury angle where he got thrown through real glass. Likely probably something similar to what happened at All In. And he got it approved by AEW. And then when he got to the arena at Collision, Punk and other people dissuade him from doing it. And then when he was like, I got it cleared, Punk said, you're not doing it here. This is not on my show. Go take that stuff to Wednesdays or something like that. So then, you know, Perry gets this cleared for All In, which I have to say, if you're going to do a spot this crazy, it should be on a big show like All In front of 80,000 people. And honestly, the spot took me completely out of the match because there's some moves in some instances, I feel, that go too far in pro wrestling where you lose your sense of disbelief and you start legitimately worrying for the competitors involved. The last time this happened to me personally was at Forbidden Door when Bryan Danielson started faking a seizure after having a known history of seizures. That was too much for me. I did not enjoy the rest of the match because that's all I could think about. Like, is he okay? Did he have a real seizure? It looks like it was fake. Why is he faking a seizure? Why is he making me feel this way? And that's kind of how I felt here of like, why did you guys do this? Like, they had gashes on their back, both of them. And it just looks so unnecessarily painful. And on top of that, you know, from a booking perspective, this was a pre-show match. And then on the main show, in one of the spotlight matches on the card, the Stadium Stampede, there was a major spot. The finishing spot, in fact, involved glass. So it felt like this pre-show match diluted this main show match. So that's like another reason why this seemed like not a good idea. But look, I'm not the decider of what's a good idea or a bad idea. Like I said, I am just a fan, and I'm here to provide to you, as unbiased as I can, the insane story that went down after this match. So, Perry goes to the back, and the first match on the main card and the next match in the lineup is the CM Punk match. So naturally, CM Punk is backstage in what is known as the gorilla position, named for Gorilla Monsoon, who used to sit right behind the curtain and call people's time cues and tell them when they should be getting to the ring and whatnot. So Punk is back there, and he is just waiting to do his match, and Perry comes in, and Punk. So there were conflicting reports here, but everyone seems to agree. Initially, actually, the story was that Perry bumped Punk or something like that, or like that Perry instigated this meeting. But since then, basically all sides agree that it was Punk who asked Perry, do we have a problem? And then here's where the reports get interesting. Now, I want to point out there's so many different angles. There's Punk's friends telling people stuff. Jack Perry's friends are telling people stuff. I want to go through all of it and leave it to you. So first, I want to give the perspective from Nick Hausman. Nick Hausman is a reporter based out of Chicago. When a year ago, when Punk had his all-out scrum where he lashed out at a reporter, it was Nick Hausman, who he had since apologized to because he thought Hausman was friends with Cabana. Turns out he hadn't been friends with Cabana for a long time. And Hausman, because of that interaction, has sort of become a de facto source of the Punk point of view in these kind of dramas. So here's Nick Hausman reporting, and you could be like, this is basically, I want to say, like, this is basically Punk's side of the story, you know, without him directly saying it, just from the way he reports on things. It's easy to tell that this guy has an in with either Punk directly or someone very close to Punk. So House of Wrestling, which is his website, HOUS of Wrestling, report. From what we are told, Punk was waiting in the gorilla position before the show went live for his match against Samoa Joe. When Perry entered the area, and walked up to him, Punk initiated the verbal exchange between the two, asking Perry if he had something to say. And the conversation quickly escalated, leading Perry asking Punk to do something about it. This is when Punk shoved Perry. Perry responded by shoving Punk back, and then Punk put him in what is being described as a chokehold. We're told Punk viewed putting Perry in a chokehold as a way to neutralize the situation, as he's a trained fighter and does not want to have to fight Perry. No punches were thrown as far as we know. Punk then walked to his dressing room, got cleaned up, spoke with AEW security. Punk, knowing that the situation was not good, asked them if it would be better for everyone if he left the building, and was told that nobody was asking him to leave, but it might make things easier if he did. I'm guessing this was after the match. Punk agreed, left the building of his own accord, walked to his hotel, and ordered Nando's for some talent whom he met up with after the show. Oh, so like if you read the House of Wrestling thing, well, you know, it's pretty calm thing. Punk just put him in a chokehold to neutralize the situation. As most people do, if they want to neutralize the situation, they put the person that's attacking them in a chokehold. I mean, I get it, but also it sounds a little one-sided, right? Like, let's let me throw in a little bias here. And I say this as a huge CM Punk fan. I am Team CM Punk all the way. And I want to also say I am Team The Elite all the way. Kenny Omega is maybe my favorite wrestler of all time. In the conversation, would be Kenny, would be Punk. I don't have a side here. My side is a fan wanting to be entertained. And you know what? As a wrestling fan all of my life and all of my adult life, enjoying the stuff backstage more than in front of the camera, I live for this shit. This is so great. I mean, it's not great. It's a bummer because this is a really big celebratory moment for AEW, and there's all this drama and everyone's stressing out when they should be celebrating. Like that's kind of lame. But as a fan of backstage gossip and as a casual third-party observer, not at all involved in this, it's kind of fun to keep it along. I mean, here we are hanging out. You're listening to me explain to you the gossip because you want to know what's going on. It's kind of fun. All right, so that was the House of Wrestling side. Then Brian Alvarez earlier this week, who was there in England for the show, he'd flown back. He did his radio show. Brian Alvarez, of course, co-host of Wrestling Observer Radio and Wrestling Observer Live with Dave Meltzer. And Alvarez said he talked to a bunch of people. And yesterday on the August 29th Wrestling Observer Live, Brian had a whole rant that he went through, kind of giving the complete timeline of what went down and also sprinkling in some new tidbits that we didn't know before. Alvarez noted that the argument happened in the gorilla position, as we've established. And he says that multiple people have heard Punk say to Jack Perry when he walked backstage, Punk said, I could beat your ass. And then Punk shoved him and put him in a choke, and it was broken up immediately. When the scuffle occurred, the scuffle got so serious that Samoa Joe had to try to break it up, and they fell on the floor, and monitors allegedly fell over on Tony Khan. Because, again, this is the gorilla position. So Khan is there. All the agents are there, the producers. And that's how bad it was. After the scuffle was broken up, Punk allegedly threatened to quit and did not want to wrestle just as the show was going live. So they're going live. They're like, here we are in London. The opening match is Punk versus Samoa Joe. And one of the people in the opening match is saying, I'm not going out there. That is stress. That is hardcore stress. In fact, they were so worried, producers were so worried, that they went and started asking other wrestlers who were wrestling later in the show if they were ready to have their match at that moment. They first went to FTR and the Bucks, who said they were not yet ready. They were the third match on the card. The second match on the card, which was the Kenny Omega, Ibushi, Hangman Page 6-man against Jay White, Juice Robinson, and Takeshita, they said they were ready, and they were about ready to go out. And I guess at this point, Samoa Joe is super angry because Samoa Joe, what the hell did he do? He wants to wrestle in front of the largest pro wrestling crowd in history, and this is being taken away from him for, in his opinion, bullshit, right? So Samoa Joe gets angry, and I guess Samoa Joe and somebody else convinced Punk to finally go out and have the match. And it's so insane to think, like, they had an incredible match. I had no idea watching the match what had just happened moments before, and you would never know because they're total professionals, and they had an incredible, awesome opening match to the show. Samoa Joe, though, not a happy camper. Yesterday, he tweeted, "Know that there are some people in life who will cherish your friendship and others who will commodify it. Both relationships can work on some level as long as you're treating it in the same way. That being said, the latter usually sucks." Pretty clear what he's saying here based on what we're learning about what happened backstage. He's none too pleased that Punk, who he considered a friend, put him in such a position to miss one of the biggest opportunities of his career. That he had to be like, dude, what's up? Like, we got to do this. I want to do this. Let's go. Don't let this drama get in the way. And then Alvarez had another shocking revelation yesterday, which hadn't been covered up until this point, which is that after Punk's match with Samoa Joe, Punk came backstage and allegedly Miro was there. And I want to mention this because Miro has been kind of getting in the crossfire a little because as soon as the story broke that there was a backstage altercation, Fightful was the first place to break the story. They said that Perry initiated some sort of fight with Punk. Miro retweeted and said that is completely false, implying that Perry did not start the fight and that he was back there because he was on the pre-show before all of them. So allegedly, Punk goes back and Miro asks, hey, is everything okay? And Punk asks him if there's a problem and if they want to step outside. So allegedly, Punk tried to step to Miro. Now, this part of the story seemed to have been debunked, but confusingly so. Initially, some outlets were saying it was completely false. Actually, Nick Hausman saying his sources, CM Punk, or friends of CM Punk were saying that's not true. Then Sean Ross Sapp on his videocast later in the night said that the story is being misreported and that it was all a goof, that Punk was in the medical office getting stitched up from the bleeding that he did during the match. And Miro checked in and was like, hey, is everything okay? And Punk jokingly said, why? Do you have a problem with me too? And then they were like, let's step outside. And then Miro said jokingly, no, let's settle this in the ring. Also, look, I'm not going to say one way or the other, but Alvarez is sticking to his guns, which is that 5 people, he says, told him this story. And none of them mentioned that this was a joke. Everyone presented that story to him as if it were legitimate and a real fight. So either, so they must have been lied to, or someone is lying to somebody, is what Alvarez was saying. But he is sticking to how he reported the story. And then this isn't even the end of it, folks. We're about 17 minutes in, and I'm not even done with this gossip. That's how many layers there are to this. Late yesterday, and this is basically the last angle of this story, Pro Wrestling Torch and Wade Keller, who has been pretty on point with his backstage analysis of AEW, Wade Keller announced, or Wade Keller wrote in his report, and I'm going to quote it directly, PW Torch has learned Punk confronted Tony Khan, who's of course the owner of AEW, in front of others and then in his locker room in what has been characterized as a heated, intense manner, and at one point, according to 3 sources who have heard about the situation, Punk told Khan that he had quit and chewed Khan out with harsh phrasing, which I'm assuming is cursed him out, right? So Punk quit even before all of this went down. This allegedly all happened before the Jack Perry confrontation. So what is going on here? Punk is not happy, obviously. Jack Perry, I'm assuming, is not happy. Sports Illustrated and Brian Alvarez both reported that Punk and Perry are suspended pending a full investigation into what is going on. Punk has said, or Nick Hausman has reported, that Punk has yet to be contacted about any such suspension. Now, the twist here, of course, is that Punk wasn't contacted directly. It was his lawyer who was contacted, notified of the suspension. And in perhaps the saddest aspect of the story, since this weekend, Punk and Tony Khan have had no communication. Even during the brawl last year, Punk and Khan were talking. Now they're not talking. AEW has a huge week of shows starting tonight in Chicago, leading into their second pay-per-view of the week, this Sunday, All In. Punk was, I'm assuming, scheduled to be a big part of this. He was scheduled either to face Ricky Starks, who he's been feuding with on Collision, or possibly start this feud with MJF over who's the real world champion. Doesn't look like that's happening. And that's a big problem for AEW, because tickets have not exactly been flying off the shelves for this Chicago show. While they did set an attendance record in London last weekend, there shall be no attendance record set this week, unless they're bad ones, which I wouldn't say they were, but tickets aren't hot. And Punk is very much the largest draw that AEW has in Chicago. So how will this affect the drawing power of their pay-per-view? And more importantly, for us as fans, like, what do we care about drawing power? We don't have investments in this. How is this going to affect the card? Like, Punk is a big draw for me as a fan Which is not to say I'm skipping All Out if Punk isn't on it, but it's going to feel weird to see an AEW show at the United Center where Punk debuted, where Punk returned, and he's not there. It's weird. You would think maybe they would delay the suspension, let Punk wrestle, take a loss to Ricky Starks or something, and then get suspended. But that's the fan talking, not the admin backstage. And here's the thing: this is the worst time for, and really, like, there's never a good time. But AEW is in the midst of a contract renegotiation. They're looking for big money. Because they need a big money contract in order to be able to compete with WWE over wrestler salaries. They need a bigger budget to be able to recruit bigger talent. CM Punk is the anchor of their Saturday show, which is not doing too hot in the ratings. It's been falling ever since the debut. I think this last weekend, it only had 500,000 viewers, which isn't that much better than Rampage. And I believe the thought process with TNT is they wanted the show to be in the top 5 of the night for Saturday. And it really has not been doing that the last few weeks. You take Punk out of the equation, what's that going to do to the show? On the other side of it, if you take Punk out of the equation, you can also start booking guys like Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks and Hangman and Jon Moxley on Collision. Maybe that'll help improve the ratings. It's a very odd time in AEW because they should be celebrating one of their biggest successes. They should be getting all their boats in a row to fight this battle, to get this new contract, to ensure that the company would be around for years to come. And instead, they're embattled in all of this drama. And I don't know. It's very weird because, like I said, I love CM Punk. I love watching CM Punk as a pro wrestler. But as somebody who has ran a company before, it seems like the solution would probably be like all of these problems would be less problems. And it's hard for me to even say out loud if CM Punk wasn't around. But I want CM Punk around. I don't want them to get rid of him. But I can understand if they do, especially if now he's fighting with Tony Khan. And Tony Khan, as much as I love CM Punk, I can't imagine there's a bigger fan of CM Punk than Tony Khan, the owner of AEW. So I can only imagine his feelings and his thoughts and his back and forth. It's probably not a pleasant time for him. It's probably very stressful for him. And I feel for him, especially knowing he has a huge pay-per-view coming up this Sunday where there hasn't been much promotion. There's only been a few matches announced. He has to do the entire build essentially tonight on Dynamite. A little bit you can do on Collision on Saturday, but you want to have your main matches announced so people know and make plans to not do anything. It's going to be a very interesting week. So yeah, that's the CM Punk stuff. I think I went through all of it. I hope you learned something or I clarified it for you so that you could now go tell your friends like, oh, I know the deal. Let me break it down. My buddy Rob broke it down for me and got all the sources together and aggregated the entire story. That's what I'm here for, to aggregate all the wrestling gossip for you, the Rock fan. I want to go through the entire card. Let's go through All In. If you haven't seen it, pause this and go and go and order the show because it was so good. It's so good that even if you know some of the results, it doesn't even matter because it was such a fun show. So let me get the results. So, okay, the pre-show kicked off, of course, with MJF and Adam Cole, Bebe, taking on Aussie Open for the Ring of Honor tag team titles. And look, MJF and Adam Cole, they're in the main event of this event. So they weren't going to do 450s or crazy table spots. They need to make sure they're not going to be injured for the main event. So this is a very safe match. But what it showed to me was how hot this crowd was. Because the whole match, all they were setting up were two moves. Max's kangaroo kick was essentially a double drop kick, which the crowd went completely nuts for. And then the double clothesline spot, which they hit, and then boom, they win the Ring of Honor tag team titles. And it kind of set the pace here in the sense that, like, Ring of Honor was trying to give the fans a happy ending. And they definitely gave it here. And so that was really great. That was a great way to kick things off. And the pre-show in general was really, really fun. They had a segment where Jeff Jarrett came out. He started doing, crowd work, telling them that America was the better country, which got a hearty laugh from me. Only for the Big Show and Anthony Ogogo and Grado to come out and do a fun little Gaga spot. Jarrett took a guitar shot from Grado. I was all about that. That's what you need. You need fun little stuff like this. This belongs on the pre-show. I was totally cool with this. And again, honestly, I wanted a battle royal on the pre-show to get as many people as you can on the show. I guess they didn't want to do that, but that would have been cool as well. Then we had the reveal. This was crazy. Mercedes Moné is hanging out. Mercedes Moné is at All In. And so that was fun. She's there, and it seems as though she's going to be coming in as soon as her ankle injury is cleared up. She was kind of I think she was in a box seat. She wasn't really up front. And I believe the reason for that was because she's still in a walking boot and they wanted to obscure the walking boot. They didn't want to show that. So that's why she was so high up. But she looked incredible. Her wig had the colors of Britain, Great Britain, red, white, and blue, of course. I guess it was more blue, white, and red. But it was great. It was great to see Mercedes, and I'm excited to see how she fits into the women's division, which could certainly use quite a power boost. Then we had the aforementioned Jack Perry versus Hook match. Brutal, disgusting, but great finish. I'm very happy for Hook. Hook looks like $1 million. I'm so happy for his development, and I look forward to see what they do with him. I hope they don't drop the ball there. Opening match of the main card. CM Punk, fresh off of choking out Jack Perry backstage, comes out to a huge reaction. Samoa Joe comes out to a huge reaction, and this is the first match where the crowd collectively lost it. They were cheering and booing both guys. Punk wasn't the heel. Joe wasn't the heel. They were both kind of playing babyface. There was this insane spot where Punk tried to jump on Joe. Joe caught him with Punk's legs wrapped around Joe's neck and threw him into the announce desk, completely breaking the wooden frame on the outside of the announce desk. It looked so sick. And then you take into account that Joe was already pissed at CM Punk over what just happened. He probably made sure to throw a little extra torque in that twist. Then Punk started doing John Cena's 5 moves of doom, which got a huge reaction from the crowd of boos, only leading to Joe to start hulking up or Joeing up, leading to another. Like, the crowd was all in on this, pun intended, and they love this. And what a great opener I thought that this was. And I was almost stunned that this was the opener. And they did a great job. In the end, Punk was being set up for a muscle buster in the corner by Joe. Punk fights out of it, grabs Joe, and he does a Pepsi plunge, known more famously as the pedigree, from the top rope, a super Pepsi plunge to win the match. I guess he didn't want to do the GTS because when he tried to do it to Joe a few weeks back, Joe's a big guy. It didn't quite work out. So Pepsi plunge it is. Stevie Richards does a show on YouTube where he analyzes wrestling moves and how they hurt and if they hurt. And he noted that if Punk put his ankle, twisted it just a little bit, he could have broke it right there based on how he landed. So could have been a lot worse, but it was fine. So that was Punk versus Joe. That was really good. And then I'm like, oh man, how are they going to follow this one up? They do the 6-man. The Golden Elite, Kenny Omega, Hangman Adam Page, and Kota Ibushi versus Juice Robinson, Jay White, and Takeshita. This was one of my most anticipated matches, and it was a very fun follow-up. This was high intensity, high paced. Everyone was doing great. As a longtime Kota Ibushi fan, it's a little difficult to watch him since returning from his injury last year because he still does not seem like the Kota Ibushi of old. Based on his Twitter, he's still dealing with an ankle injury, which kind of explains when they were going for their golden triangle moonsaults, both him and Kenny would run to the opposite turnbuckle and then jump to the outside second rope and then do a moonsault. So when they would do this, Kenny landed it perfectly. Coda, unfortunately, slipped on the second turnbuckle and then did the moonsault from the first turnbuckle. Total credit to Coda for not losing it and like recovering really quickly and figuring out how to get through it. But the old Kota Ibushi would have never messed this up. And I even hate saying it. Like it's such a high standard to hold him up to because he was such an incredible wrestler that it's almost unfair to say that. But it's noticeable and it's a bummer. Still, this was a really, really fun match. It almost ended out of nowhere intentionally with a roll-up from Takeshita on Omega. This match could have gone on another 15 minutes for me. I would have loved it. So this was a really good one. How did they follow this? Oh my God. FTR versus the Young Bucks is next. It's the third match on the show. I was stunned. And I could tell they were going to go a really long time because when they started, things were going a little slow. They were starting out a little slow, letting the crowd recover from the last two matches. Possibly some people had to hit the bathroom. They knew that. They wanted to wait a little, give people the time. And but then like 15 minutes in, business really picks up. And they're doing false finishes. They're doing each other's finishes. They're leaving it all out in the ring. And they had me hook, line, and sinker. There was a false finish where the Young Bucks get a pin. And I was like, oh, this is it. They're winning. Because I assumed the Young Bucks were going to win the match. And they kicked out. And I don't want to toot my own horn too much, but I am a jaded wrestling fan. And it takes a lot for me to buy into a false finish. I bought into this false finish. And that's the sign of a great match for me. I was all in, again, pun intended, on this match. This was fantastic. And FTR got the surprising win, which leads me to question where things are going from here. Maybe they're going to be feuding with Aussie Open now because they have great matches. And now that Aussie Open aren't the Ring of Honor champions. How are they going to follow up this incredible match? Well, let's do a Stadium Stampede. Of course, that's the only way to keep escalating. And that's what the show did. It kept escalating, which was really, really impressive. They kept the momentum going. This match was wild. So much stuff happened here. So much violence. Moxley, for the first time on an AEW show, introduced the Skewers. I first saw them, in the indies and death matches. Always thought it was a bit too much, the Skewers. But hey, this is all in. If you're going to do too much, you do it at the big stadium show. And Moxley put in the skewer, Moxley introduces the Skewers. Penta blocks the Skewers only to spike Moxley's forehead with his own skewers. And then Penta leaves it. And then you see Moxley just standing up with these wooden skewers poking out of his neck, out of his forehead, and the crowd is gross, but not too grossed out. Then half the skewers fall out, and some are just stuck in his head. That's when the crowd totally lost it. It was a very, very cool spot. There was a lot of very innovative violence in this match. At one point, they did a very weird injury angle with Penta, which, again, I'm not a fan of these because it takes me out. Only because they wanted to bring him back as Penta Oscuro, Dark Penta, later on in the match, which kind of came off like a dud. I mentioned this previously, but of course the ending involved glass. It was, I believe it was like an ending from Kickboxer where Orange Cassidy had a glass bottle and some tape. So he taped his fist up because he has the orange punch. He taped the fist with the glue side of the tape open. Then he took a glass bottle, shattered it, and then he put his hand so the tape was picking up the glass. So his fist was glassed up. And then he got a orange punch on Claudio to win the match. And this is what I'm saying. Like, this was a very innovative finishing spot involving glass. They should have saved the glass for this. This is why they shouldn't have done the glass stuff in the opening, in the 0 hour. Come on, guys. This is producers need to be talking to each other. Then after this, they followed up with the women's match. And I thought that the Saraya entrance with Queen and her family accompanying her was very nice. It was very classy, very touching. I've heard that Saraya's family, some of them been kind of canceled online. I don't want to delve too deep into it. So, but putting that aside, I thought this was really cool. It was really cool how they integrated Saraya's mom. Saraya's mom was holding up, I believe, Hikaru Shida for Toni Storm to slap, and Hikaru Shida gets out of the way, only for Toni Storm to slap Saraya's mom, and then Saraya lost it. And the finish was Britt Baker had Hikaru Shida in her finisher, the lockjaw, and Toni Storm was about to run in with the women's title and hit Britt Baker with the women's title, only for Saraya to come in with the spray and spray it in Toni Storm's face. Toni Storm and her, prior to this, were a team. Sprayed in Toni Storm's face and steal the victory and become the new women's champion and have her moment in Wembley Stadium. It's a nice moment for Saraya, former Paige, and I thought it was very well done. I do think that this kind of makes the women's title like Saraya isn't somebody that could really wrestle too often. So what's going to happen now? Well, like, they got a lot of work to do to build up this division, I think. Next, we had, again, they're just keeping things moving. The coffin match, Darby Allin and Sting versus Swerve Strickland and Christian Cage. And Swerve came out and had his song performed, which was cool. And then it's time for Darby Allin and Sting to make their entrance. And Sting is doing this whole Jack the Ripper thing. Then we get this little pre-tape, which I thought was very cool. And he's kind of morphed into Joker Sting, which, sure, let's run with it. But then the real highlight is they cut back to the arena, and all of a sudden you hear... It's Seek and Destroy. It's Metallica. On All In. I was dying. I was all in on this because it was so cool. First time in over 20 years that Sting comes out to Metallica Seek and Destroy. Of course, after the Ready to Rumble movie, WCW licensed the live Woodstock 99 version of Seek and Destroy, and that was Sting's entrance theme all throughout virtually the end of WCW. It was so cool. And look, I'm going to be honest with you guys. This is really when I got into like deep cut Metallica. It was when Sting started coming out to Seek and Destroy. I was like, oh, I got to check out Kill 'Em All. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the fastest album I've ever heard. then I like really dove into Metallica all because of Sting. So I was all about this. And it was against Swerve and Christian Cage. All four of these guys worked super hard. They were doing spots on the coffin, which again mirrored the opening match with doing the spots on the limousine. It kind of numbed some of the pain of it because you already saw it. But they did a great job with the coffin. They did a great job going back and forth, making you think like, oh, Sting might lose. But in the end, of course, Sting and Darby win the match, get the crowd cheers, and we hear Metallica one more time. I was loving it. Then I was like, man, how many matches are left? There's only 3 matches left? That's crazy. The show's flying by. We get Chris Jericho versus Will Ospreay. And this is a match where Jericho had a lot to prove. A lot to prove. First, he's performing with his band, Fozzy. Largest performance they ever had. Easy. In front of 81,000 people. Jericho does the Freddie Mercury, whoa, get the crowd going, which I'm sure he was pretty amped about. And then he sings himself to the ring. Second only after Mecha Wolf earlier this year. Mecha Wolf was the first wrestler to sing himself to the ring. Now Jericho, the second. And they had a great match. Will Ospreay pulled out this 20-year-old version of Jericho, like this version of Jericho that we hadn't seen for 20 years. Jericho was on his A game. He was doing high spots. They put together a great match. And in the end, very definitively, Will Ospreay defeated Chris Jericho, which I thought was pretty nuts. I thought that was very kind of Chris Jericho to give Will Ospreay the definitive win. And based on how they're presenting Will Ospreay, he got the full superstar fireworks treatment. I think it's pretty much set in stone that when his contract is up in January, Will Ospreay is coming to AEW. And then we had the House Rules match for the Trios title with the Acclaimed versus House of Black. House of Black looked absolutely incredible. And they brought out a little lantern to pay tribute to Bray Wyatt, Wyndham Rotunda, which I thought was very classy. And And then, of course, they had a great match. It was a fun match. It was interesting that this was kind of the bathroom break match between the two main events. But even still, the crowd was super into it. They kept it pretty short. And in the end, of course, badass Billy Gunn got the win, helped their team get the win. And the Acclaimed are the Trios champions. I'm a little upset. I mean, the Acclaimed are great. I love the Acclaimed, and they're going to be great Trios champions. But I really loved the House of Black's run with the Trios title. And I'm curious now, like, are they going to get singles runs? Like, I hope the House of Black doesn't fade into the background, and they're still one of the prominent acts featured on the show. Finally, main event time. MJF versus Adam Cole. They each get their own fun, unique entrance. MJF is in full devil mode. He's got his worshipers bowing down to him. This match was high-end melodrama. This was almost WWE levels of melodrama, but in its own way. And I was totally sucked into the drama. Of course, these guys are best friends, but they both have a vicious side to them. They're both kind of jerks. They can be jerks. So the question was, who was going to turn on who? But in the end, neither guy could turn on either guy. Neither one. Both of them cherished their friendship too much to do anything dastardly. And in the end, though, MJF did get the victory. And I think it was over a cradle, because Adam Cole was debating hitting MJF with the world title while the ref was down. And Roderick Strong's cheering him on, and Adam Cole couldn't do it. And instead he went for a regular move, got rolled up, boom, it's over. They hug it out. They have a big celebration at the end. And this is all in. And it was great. It was, first of all, it was like 5:30 in the afternoon. I'm wide awake. I'm ready for more wrestling. I was like, they could have done 2 or 3 more matches. I would have loved it. But it was an incredible show. And it's unfortunate that, we're talking about what a fun show, so many great action-packed matches. But the real story coming out of it is a backstage fight that happened at the top of the show. It's kind of a bummer. Hopefully next week, after All Out, AEW can get the momentum back going. It'll be interesting to see what they do tonight on Dynamite. Ultimately, people are talking about AEW, so that has to be considered some sort of victory. And I just spent 45 minutes talking about AEW. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned something as the police are coming to get me here. And let me know. Hit me up on social media at Rob Pasbani, at Squared Circle Pit. Let me know if you enjoyed this review, if you have any questions, and what you think about this whole CM Punk controversy. I'd love to hear it. Thanks, as always, for tuning in to Squared Circle Pit.